Drum Live Station is a Korean arcade rhythm game similar to Drum Mania, in which players are tasked with hitting notes scrolling vertically down the screen in time with the music on a drum-like controller. This game's controller in particular opts for an actual drum set, as opposed to the typical rubber pads you'd find on similar games, which I honestly think looks really cool, even though it can apparently be so loud that it drowns out the game itself on lower volumes. The game features a few main music categories, including new music, K-pop, and pop, notably with every song credited to somebody by the name of Kiwi. There's also a Yop category, which probably rings a bell, considering nearly all of this game's music was also featured in Andamiro's Pump It Up series. But this game wasn't developed by Andamiro, was it? For those who don't know, Pump It Up is a Korean dance simulation game released in 1999 by Andamiro, with gameplay largely resembling Konami's Dance Dance Revolution series. Instead of using arrows pointed in the 4 cardinal directions, the game is instead played using 5 arrows, 4 pointed towards the corners of the platform and 1 in the center. Up until June 2001, with the release of Pump It Up the Premiere, the game was exclusive to Korea, but after its international debut, it quickly began to gain quite a large following, which only picked up more and more quickly over time as subsequent releases built on the game's features, song list, and functionality. Drum Live Station, in comparison, might as well be lost media. It seems to have only had one version released, it's very poorly documented, and almost nobody I've talked to about it has ever even heard of it. Pump It Up also includes a lot of original music by Banya, an in-house group made up of several members including Yop and MS Goon, who later went on to become solo artists. But why are several of Yop's songs included in Drum Live Station if they were meant to be Pump It Up originals? See, this game's similarities don't end with the presence of a Yop category, not even close. Most of the game's music seems to be made up of classic Pump It Up music, including Canon D, Chimera, Arch of Darkness, the Final Audition series, Love is a Danger Zone, and much of the classic K-pop you'd find in Andamiro's #1 dance simulation game. The only exception would be the few cover songs like Master of Puppets or Smells Like Teen Spirit, which were notably cut from the Pump It Up games. The credit text, the copyright text beneath the logo, and many of the game's sound effects are identical to their counterparts in the earlier Pump It Up games, and the art style of the characters seen throughout the menus bears a striking resemblance to the artwork seen in Pump It Up NX and onward. Not only that, but the game's hardware and even boot sequence match what you'd find in pump cabs from the same generation nearly 1-to-1, running the same Mark IX spec PC hardware introduced with NX2 and used up until Prime, and the bootloader sequence only lacks the Andamiro-specific text along the top of the screen. So, Andamiro must have developed this game for the similarities to go that deep, right? Nearly all of its songs are featured in Pump It Up, and it uses the Pump It Up bootloader, and the core gameplay loop is nearly identical to that of the Pump It Up NX series, so the answer is obvious, right? Well, not exactly. This wouldn't be a very interesting video if it was that straightforward, would it? As some of you may have noticed earlier, the game's title screen credits planners where you'd expect to see Andamiro, and there's not a single mention of Andamiro's name anywhere in this game. In fact, everything I've gone over already is the vast majority of the information I've been able to find about this game's history on the internet. There's almost zero real information about Drum Live Station or its development team anywhere, and despite having some semblance of a player base and seeing gameplay videos being posted on YouTube until at least 2018, it seems as though this game's been all but completely forgotten about. I could not find a lot of information about this game on the internet, so when it comes to the game's mechanics, the best resources I have are the gameplay videos posted here on YouTube and one slightly lengthy Korean blog post. From what I can tell, the core gameplay is very similar to NX-era Pump It Up games, where after inserting a credit, the game prompts you to insert a card containing your profile and pick a station, with the options consisting of training mode, arcade, and level test, followed by a basic tutorial before bringing you to the song selection screen. According to this post, it's possible that the card system may have been purely a location test thing and didn't ever see widespread use, but it's difficult to confirm, especially with what could just be a sketchy translation. Each station largely resembles the ones found in Pump It Up, with training and arcade stations likely sharing the same functionality as their pump equivalents. I could only find 2 videos of the level test station, both from 2008, one of which is only available in 144p, but assuming the representative of the station's gameplay as a whole, it replaces the note field with sheet music and has you read and drum along with that, which I think makes for an interesting challenge. I really wish I could find more footage of it. But unlike Pump It Up, the difficulty scale goes all the way up to 50 and beyond instead of being limited to 28 and below. Upon finishing a song, you're greeted by the classic Pump announcer voice alongside a judgment breakdown and a performance grade.
Your rank is A.
I really can't overstate how much this feels like Pump It Up, but with drums, right down to the animations, sound effects, and the overall feel of the game. Additionally, when it comes to some of the game's more unique mechanics, there's an auto bass option that has the game automatically hit the kick drum so you can play purely with your hands, and a neat little preview note field in-game to the right of the regular note field that shows the next few upcoming measures of notes. Also worth mentioning are the hidden tracks on the song wheel, which are presumably unlocks accessed through the profile system. I also noticed while scrolling through videos that the announcer voice isn't always the same. I don't know if this is a variation between different versions of the game itself, whether it depends on the currently selected station, or whether this was changed in an update at some point, assuming the game ever got any. Now, I had a few initial ideas about what might be going on with this game. I figured it's very possible that this is something very similar to what happened with In the Groove 2, where Andamiro assisted another studio with the development of the game's hardware, except this time extending to the software side of things as well, instead of just offering to build the cabinets. Or maybe, albeit seemingly less likely, planners paid Andamiro for the license to use their content for their own game in some kind of reverse Technomotion type scenario. But I don't think either of those guesses are very representative of the whole picture. I really wish there was more about this game for me to talk about. Games like this are super fascinating to me, ones that obviously had enough of a following for people to play and get quite good at, but have nearly zero documentation outside of a few scattered forum posts and short gameplay videos. In fact, quite a bit of the information in this video came from a single blog post by a user named Slayers85 detailing their first experience with the game. Everything else is from various videos of people actually playing it. I'd really love to know more about its development, what links it back to the Pump It Up series, and how exactly Andamiro was involved. It's too bad there are no other resources. Sorry, what's that? There's still
6 minutes
left in the video? Alright, I guess that means there's really only one place left to go from here. After running out of resources on the open internet, I figured I'd start asking around and bringing up the game in places where I might run into somebody who's played it. I didn't have to do all that much searching either. In fact, the first time I mentioned it, over in the Pump It Up Discord server, I got a reply from a player named Jimbo who had actually played the game before. Alongside this image of a machine featuring different artwork that I hadn't seen yet, they explained that it's a pretty common machine in Indonesia as a substitute for Drummania, and that the charting is really bad on the highest difficulty, with harder songs being overcharted and presumably not flowing all too well. They also mentioned that, with the game using real drums instead of MIDI pads, you can't hear the music at all on lower volumes, which is unfortunate considering how cool the game looks with the real drum set front and center. But that's not all Jimbo was able to help with. I hadn't even considered this in the first place because it seems so far out of the realm of possibility, but a few messages and one Facebook link later, I was faced with what could possibly be the key to confirming my suspicions. It turns out that not only is Yop himself present on predominantly English-speaking social media, but he's fairly active as well. After spending some time thinking about how I could possibly start a conversation, not knowing remotely how this could go or whether or not I'd even hear back, and especially considering how little I'd ever actually used Facebook before myself, I sent him a message. And not only did I hear back, but it only took around 15 minutes. Just like that, I had some answers. The back and forth wasn't a very long one. I imagine he's probably a busy guy, and I didn't want to bother him too much about a game that's nearly a decade and a half old at this point. That said, I was still able to get some much needed information about this game. So remember how, towards the start of the video, I mentioned all the songs being credited to somebody by the name of Kiwi? It turns out they were actually the one behind the idea of Drum Live Station, as opposed to being some sort of cover artist, so their name was displayed rather frequently in-game. He was also able to confirm Andamiro's involvement in the game's development, stating that it was a collaboration between Andamiro and another group of developers, with Yop providing music, charts, and sound work. This also explains why so many of the game's menu sound effects also match up with what's used in Pump It Up, and I think it's reasonable to imagine that Yop wasn't the only Andamiro employee at the time who worked directly on the game due to the number of visual similarities the game also shares. He unfortunately couldn't recall exactly which songs were locked behind hidden tracks, which I think is understandable considering how long it's been, but I think it's also worth noting his mention of Pump It Up Extra in comparison to Drum Live Station. Extra was released on January 20th, 2001, and was primarily developed by F2 System, the same developers who were behind Technomotion, the infamous 9-panel dance game whose logo you might recognize as the one that Stepmania's old logo was based on. Despite Perfect Collection having already been released, it was supposedly developed using OBG's source code as a base. After Technomotion was released, F2 System paid Andamiro to allow them to use the Pump It Up license in order to create Extra. Interestingly enough, this lends a bit of credibility to what I mentioned earlier as what I thought was the less likely scenario. I honestly wasn't expecting it to be brought up in such a straightforward manner, but it does make sense that the developers were able to license content from Pump It Up for use in Drum Live Station, considering that Andamiro's name is nowhere to be found. Unlike in the Groove 2, where it's present on the cabinet artwork as well as the title screen, although that only applies to Andamiro-made cabinets, specifically ones where the game hadn't been updated yet. Does this mean that Planners is actually F2 System and that they're the ones Andamiro worked with on Drum Live Station? Probably not. While there's probably some possibility that there's a connection of some sort there, it would honestly just be baseless speculation on my part, and it's impossible to say for sure. Besides, F2 System is still around today, mostly working on gambling machines based on their official website as of right now. In conclusion, to sum all that information up, Drum Live Station was a game planned by an individual by the name of Kiwi, developed as a collaboration between Andamiro and another group of developers known as Planners, featuring sound design, charts, and music by Yop, and filled with classic content licensed from the Pump It Up series circa 2007. I've been fascinated by this game ever since I'd first heard of it, and even though I wasn't able to find out exactly who Planners might be or figure out exactly which part of the game was worked on by who, I was able to answer the biggest question I had going into this, which was, did Andamiro make this, or is this just a bootleg crammed full of Pump It Up music? At the same time, I hope I was able to expose this game to a larger group of people. For how common it seems to be in some places, it's extremely underdocumented, and I'd really love to see more information about it come to light over time, and maybe even have the chance to play it myself someday. Even if, to most people who have played it, it's just a Drum Mania clone acting as a stand-in where there's no better option available, it would be a shame for it to be lost to time completely. Thanks for watching. I've wanted to work on a video like this for quite a long time, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I'm not sure how much of this sort of stuff I'll be working on in the future, but I'd love to make more content exploring super obscure titles in the rhythm game scene. If you have any questions or know anything else about Drum Live Station, or really any other super obscure or rare games, feel free to join my Discord or send me a message. All that info, along with all the public sources of information that went into this video, can be found down in the description. Also, huge thanks to everyone here that provided information about the game. This wouldn't have been possible without you. I don't have a Patreon, but if you want to support what I do, consider checking out my Ko-fi page. Thank you.